Aljo versus Max Holloway, guys. I love this idea. Do you? So let me tell you where this is coming from. Aljo has flirted with the idea of going to 145 pounds for a while now. Aljo flirted with this idea when he was the 135-pound champion. He said, I'm tired of the weight cut. And moreover, Aljo was able to look at the pieces and say, hey, this business between me and Merab is going to become a problem. So to solve the problem, we're going to solve this the same way that Daniel Cormier and Cain Velasquez solved the problem. I'm going to leave the weight class. One of us has to go. I've had my moment. It's going to be me. I love it. I love it. I like it, but I'm just reminding you guys it's very consistent. So when Aljo dropped the belt to O'Malley, yes, he wanted the rematch, and yes, he kind of put the brakes on 145, but not fully. Like, I will tell you that I don't think the change to 145 should have been affected by passing the belt at 135. Because he was going to leave the belt either way. Right? Whether he left it when somebody else's care or he left it vacant and went up, he was going to leave it either way. And Aljo was doing a Q&A. And somewhere within the Q&A, Aljo asked the question. I think he was there to answer questions, but somewhere he asked a question and said, am I going to be fighting Max Holloway next? Now, that was interesting. He just set that down and walked away, but I loved it. I love that fight. In fact, I don't know of an Aljo fight I would rather see. I'm an advocate for history prevailing and Aljo getting a rematch against Sean. But I don't know that I would rather see that than see Aljo at 145. And I mean, that is the pursuit of a championship. Make no mistake. None of us believe that at 145, you can beat Max Holloway and not become the number one contender. As a matter of fact, it's so well believed that if you're going to create number one contenders, keep them away from Max. Our current number one contender, who's great, by the way, Ilia Topuria is really great, but there was a calculated effort. If you want to keep him great and keep him climbing, keep him away from Max. This is the first top contender to get there, not crossing paths with the number one guy, who happens to be Max. I have no problem with that. I'm just explaining to you that if Aljo's coming up, he's coming up on pursuit of a championship. If he stays at 35, he's staying there on pursuit of a championship. And that would be a very fast path to it. He's not going to walk in at 45 to a title fight. That's according to him. He understood that, unless he was the 35-pound champ. He understands that. Very respectful when he talks about Volkanovski and Volkanovski's power. But this would be the ultimate way to see how are you going to do it this weight class. That's just from Aljo's standpoint. Just from Aljo's standpoint, I don't know that I have been as excited to picture in my mind him walking out there and the build-up and the match and how are we going to break this down? And this is probably going to go on a pay-per-view, which means it's going to be 3 rounds. If it went on top of a fight night card, now all of a sudden you got a main event and you're going 5 rounds, which is a very different breakdown. It's a very, very different breakdown. But moreover, what do you do with Max? Max is in a wildly confusing position. And it looked like the clouds were kind of starting to part for Max, and then they came back together, and those clouds being that Volkanovski was going to leave, go up to 155. Volk said, hey, I don't want to wait the time period it's going to take for Islam. So I'm just going to stay here and go with Ilia Topuria. All right, great. But it still changes what's next and what opportunities are there for Max, right? Max is put in this position where people want to see him fight. He's a very big star. He's a very big draw. There's a main event guy. There's a world champion. There's a future Hall of Famer that you can't put against the top competition, or all you're going to do is eliminate your next opportunity to have a number one contender. That's all Max is going to do. He is the ultimate gatekeeper. There has never been a gatekeeper as dominant as Max, right? It goes Volk, it goes Max, and there's a big step down. I'm just bringing that to you because some fresh blood within the division, a new match, a new challenge, unexpected parity. I love it. Not only do I like that fight, when I compare and juxtapose that against the next best idea for either one of them, that's where I don't just like it anymore. Now I love it. Whatever I would have in mind for Max, whatever I would have in mind for Aljo, no, you put them together, exponentially better. For me, as a fan, I'm just self-projecting. I'd love to hear what you guys think about it. Max, what a nice guy, by the way. Did you guys hear what Max did for Zombie? It's the thought that counts. I don't actually know if this gesture was accepted, but Zombie retired after his fight with Max. Now Zombie quit fighting 2 years ago, but he retired after his fight with Max. And so you got your gloves, right? You wanted to hang on to those gloves. They were going to be a keepsake, whatever he was going to do with them, but they were his gloves and they were his final gloves, and somebody stole them. He was walking out of the ring. A fan reached over. They took him. They took his gloves right out of his hands. Zombie didn't get them back. Did you guys know this story? True story. Max finds out. So Max decides, well, let me do the next best thing, because I also have a pair of gloves that were involved in your last fight. Here you go. And Max offered him his gloves. I don't know if Zombie accepted that. That's the only part I don't know. I would imagine he accepted the gift, but I don't know. What a kind thing to do. I mean, that's just a thoughtful and nice thing to do. And everything you see about Max, I mean, this is just a kind, right? Kind isn't a word you get to use very often. Oh, he's a nice guy. He's a cool guy. He's a kind person, but he is not inside that octagon. Did you see his fight with Brian Ortega? There was nothing kind. That was a black heart. Did you see his fight with Calvin Kattar, where he's taunting him and telling him, come on, step closer so I can hit you more, as though he hadn't already hit him enough? I mean, Max is a competitor. He's got a black heart. He does not care about that opponent or that opponent's sacrifice or that opponent's dreams. He wants it all for himself, which you have to be. You cannot become a world champion if you don't have a black heart when it comes to competition. But just an interesting guy. It's a very interesting fight. Max versus Aljo. And the question becomes, well, what are you fighting for? It would seem as though Aljo would be fighting for number one contendership. And that wouldn't be disputed. If Aljo beat Max, he would then be the number one contender. That wouldn't be disputed, and that's largely because there's nobody with a meaningful argument to fight Volk. There's not even anybody trying to argue to fight Volk. The last two guys that should have been fighting Volk didn't argue to fight Volk. Volk said, go fight each other. You're boring me. And he was right. He was right. Rodriguez and Emmett, who were both told to the world we're number one contenders 1 week apart, right? Same message, 1 week apart. Well, it's MMA. This is the way we do it, right? We follow the rules we make up on the spot. Either way, they didn't go after, they didn't even call him out. To the point that folks said, go fight each other then. But that's what it's like at 145. I mean, that's not even a question. Not even a maybe. If Aljo beat him, he'd be fighting for the belt. But if Max beat Aljo, Max just stays in this weird purgatory where there's another top potential contender that he's eliminated. And that's the only thing that might make the boys on the second floor at the UFC have pause before they make this fight.